Hello, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. Thank you so much for joining today for our Talking Talent, sustainable hiring. How mission-driven companies are hiring talent. If you've joined before, welcome back. Great to have you back, and thank you for joining again. And for those who don't know Talking Talent yet, during Talking Talent, we invite speakers on a virtual stage to share some of their insights on topics related to the future of work. And today, obviously, like I said, we'll be focusing on sustainable hiring and how to hire for talent for a company with a sustainable mission. So we've invited 3 speakers who are all experiencing this to come and share their experiences and kind of stories around this. So the first 30 minutes will be our discussion points that we will go through. As we're talking, please feel free to add your questions to the sidebar that will be upvoted, and yeah, we'll get to them in the final 30 seconds. I'm going to make sure I turn these notifications off so that you can't hear those in a second. But before we kick off with introducing the panel, let me just quickly introduce Accelerate, who is backing Talking Talent. So we're a recruitment startup based in Berlin and London that offers an embedded recruitment service where our talent partners become a part of your team in order to hire great people for your team. So this is our in-house model. We also offer additional services such as our executive recruitment and our employer branding. So at the end, after this event, please feel free to reach out to myself or any other member of the Accelerate team if you're looking for anything, support on anything related to hiring. Great. And then I would now just like to introduce our speakers for today, to introduce themselves quickly, one by one. Maybe we'll go in the order that's on the screen. So Lupa Miller, would you like to begin and introduce yourself quickly?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the invitation to speak today. A bit about Plan A. We started Plan A 3 years ago, and the company has always been on a mission to help individuals and businesses find their way into action against climate change. Today, our main product is a software that helps companies calculate, monitor, and reduce their emissions. We help hundreds of companies across Germany, France, UK, and Finland work with data in a very straightforward manner, understand their CO2 levels, and then take action, which is essentially not only offsetting, but going into actually taking action and reducing your CO2. We are based in Berlin, and I can also say, and I'm happy to see Moritz here, Mitte is one of our clients, conveniently.
Great. Then Moritz, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Thanks for organizing this, and I can only just recommend it to anyone in the discussion to work with Accelerate. We've had great experiences in hiring as well. I'm also flattered to be here because I'm not really, primarily, I don't have so much experience in working in people and culture, or HR as it was supposed to be called. I'm interim head of people and culture at the moment, but it's very close to my heart, and I find this a super important topic, and generally the topic of future work, especially during these times. Briefly about myself, I've always worked kind of at the intersection of, I guess, society and business. My first work kind of was an NGO in the work experience was an NGO in the education space. I then worked in consulting in the public sector, started a company called Coffee Circle, maybe some of you know, that's active in Berlin back in 2010. Have then moved again into consulting for an NGO in East Africa in the coffee sector for 2 years, working with the Gates Foundation. And then, started Mitte in 2016. And Mitte, we're not in the market yet, so some of you, or most, I guess, of you wouldn't know what we're doing. We are basically aiming at replacing or finding a more sustainable way of hydrating, replacing bottled water. With machines that you can, install in your home. We are currently, we're based in Berlin as well. Have a team of around 50 people, mostly engineers, all quite motivated, and we'll talk about that with our, I think, sustainable vision. And even engineers who tend to sometimes not be so excited. I think this is a key factor of hiring. So we'll talk about that. And sorry for taking so long.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny. I'm the Chief People Officer at Ecosia. And Ecosia is a search engine that plants trees. So basically, when you search with Ecosia, the profits from those searches go into tree planting projects that we have all over the world, Africa, Brazil, really the Philippines, and many, many places. And yeah, we're a sustainable company, and we care about sustainability in all our processes, not just the end product, so also a lot internally. And just a bit about my role at Ecosia. I basically started with Ecosia 2 years ago, but first as a consultant in people and development subjects. And because they've had so much recent growth, they went from 30 to 70 people in the past year, and we keep growing. There was a need to actually form a formal people and culture team, so I've taken that over in December. And yeah, just a bit about my background. I actually started in journalism, and I studied acting, and then I studied business, and then I worked at the UN in environmental affairs for a while, but then also worked in film production, kind of went forth and back. And then I think around 5 years I switched to company culture and people development, and have been following that since.
Great. Thank you so much for your introduction. And I think we'll just dive straight in with our discussion point. So this is one I think we've all kind of discussed when we were all sort of catching up with each other in our introduction calls, and we thought it'd be an interesting one to kick off with. So really, how does your sustainable mission impact the way you hire talent? So does it impact what kind of talent you're looking for? Does it impact how you approach hiring talent? It's really interesting. Maybe we can start with Moritz.
Okay. So I think that the mission or a mission, any mission, will impact the way you hire talent. And I think there are three factors. So I think there is the first factor, which is there will be a natural filter of the people that are applying to you, right? Because they will see some of them will probably not care, but many of them will care what type of values you seem to represent, or maybe you put openly out there. So I think that's the first thing. So the natural filter of I want to do something that's in line with my values. So I think that's the first factor. I think the second factor is that our people and culture team, our talent acquisition team, is actively looking for people that have a similar value set. So that would be one of the screening criterion, much like, and obviously that's much simpler, but like, do you have a working visa, right? So what's your what are the things that you are interested in? Varying on position as well, but so that's the second thing. And I think the third thing, it's almost a kind of a reinforcing mechanism. Once you hire the right people with the right value set, they will become hiring managers, right? And then you will basically have this reinforcing mechanism of people hiring good people again. So I think those are for me, the three factors how a sustainable mission impacts the way we hire talent.
And just to follow up there quickly, do you think then that values is something maybe you hold at the top of your criteria, in particular when it's a sustainable mission, which obviously, like you said, appeals to people's sort of ethics and why they really want to be a part of a mission? Do you think that's something maybe that you have on a high level compared to other criteria, or is it still kind of relatively equal?
I think it's just as important. And we have put out, maybe someone has been on our website recently, we've just published what we call a manifesto, and maybe talk about that. I think there's some of the other questions that relate to that as well. But we have published a manifesto, which is around what we call the 4 Ps. So it's how do we want to treat the planet? How do we want to treat, what purpose do we have? What products do we build? And how do we want to treat people? So it is a natural filter that we use for hiring. But so I do think that values are important, but I think it's very difficult to say, oh, this is more important than that. I think it's a holistic package that you will need to hire for, because if you think about it, you can't, you're gonna hire someone with the right value set, but then maybe incompetent or not not the right fit for what they need to do, then there's no use. So I think it always needs to be both. It needs to be the right value set, the right attitude, and the right competence, and obviously other, soft skills and so forth. So I think that it's always a holistic package, and I would not put one above the other.
Great, thank you, Moritz. Miller, would you like to go next?
Sure. So with regards to how we approach the topic in Plan A, hiring is something really important. And of course, we have kind of set out a process that makes sure that the values of the new people coming in are aligned to the values of the ones that are already in the company. When we started building Plan A, kind of my motivation to build the company was my shock and awe with regards to how little action there was taken in relation to climate change, and especially how little businesses were doing related to the topic. And this is some of the questions that we ask to candidates. We ask them, what do you think about greenwashing? What are the good examples of greenwashing? What is for you a good idea of effective reduction of CO2? Because this is, at the end of the day, what essentially our product does. And it really quickly kind of becomes clear whether this person fits or not. We have very few people that eat meat, for example, on the team. And I know that this is not a prerequisite to join a company, but it kind of is something that has naturally happened based on the fact that we set out this mindset before anyone even sends us a cold email sending their CV. And I totally agree with what Moritz said. It's really important to kind of set out these values out there so that people that are looking into your company to join it or to write about it or to tell a story about what you're doing, have a really clear idea of what you want to be checked on and what kind of sustainability KPIs you have. And for us, this is definitely aligned and kind of is of equal importance as like technical skills, but it's also, I would say, something that is probably the first filter before you can enter the company.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And Jenny, maybe you could go next.
Yeah. I'd actually like to say something to the 2 points they've mentioned, because I thought they were quite good. In our company, also, it happens that most people don't eat meat, for example, and we anyways have vegetarian and vegan dishes. But
I think we have 80%. Sorry, 80%.
But what I want to say with that also, it's not an exclusion criteria either. You want to see that people care about it and they're improving, but everybody's also on their own journey, and it's not cutthroat. If you really care about it and you're behind it, and wherever you're at in that journey, of course there are natural inclinations, and most people don't eat meat, and most people try to avoid flying and all of that for sure. But I would just say people should also be kind to themselves and try and do their best. And I don't think it's a cutthroat selection process in that way. And regarding the way you select talent, I also think, we want to hire the best, but we also really want to hire people that are in line with our values and our mission. And that means that, for example, we have a rule that we don't hire brilliant jerks, in the sense that you can be the absolute best, but if you're a jerk, we don't want you. And I think that's more a line to draw. It's not an either or. It's not, okay, if you fit the mission, then you don't have to be that good at your job. No, I would, of course, say there's always room to grow and learn for applicants, but we do want to hire the best. But at the same time, there's just simply a line where maybe potentially other companies, or I know in the past, like, oh, this person is perfect and they're a top performer, and no matter what, it's like, no brilliant jerks. And I think that's more like a line to draw in that way.
Very interesting to hear that there's so many vegans and vegetarians.
We opened the Berlin bubble, right? I mean,
yeah, probably a hyperconference in Berlin anyway, so it's kind of the luck of the draw.
Interesting to take a poll in the call and see how many people.
Yeah. Definitely. Okay,
we managed to actually convert a few people. I must say that when we hired them, they were not really interested in, skipping meat. The only one left that we have now is my co-founder, who's French. So he's still cheating sometimes, but it really is a process. And I totally agree with Jenny with regards to sustainability should not be like a defined set of rules that you really need to all adhere to in order to get into the company. It's just about like the mindset.
Really, really nicely said, I think. Great, maybe we can move on to the second question. My person behind the screen, there she is. Because I think that maybe there might be a little overlap with the first question anyway. So have you found that candidate motivation is higher due to the company's ethical mission? So we've obviously now approached it from the company side and what they really look for in a candidate, and then kind of how is your experience in how the candidates are motivated? Do you feel like you have a really big influx of candidates? Do you feel like people are much more motivated and very passionate about the topic, or what's your kind of experience? Maybe Jenny, we could start with you.
Sure, yeah. Oh, I think that's an absolute yes. I do think it's much higher. And even if I think of my own experience, I knew Ecosia 5 years before I even applied there. And then I think I kind of had my own manifestation board, and I was like, oh, I would love to work for Ecosia one day. And then it took a few years, but eventually I ended up there. But I've been using them and I've been recommending them to friends just because I felt like they're great. And so you have this excitement already when you go for a company. It's like, I've used you, I've recommended you, I'm already kind of your advocate, and now you have a position that fits what I want to do. Great. And I do think, I know, unfortunately I haven't been able to reply yet, but I know a few people have reached out to me that are listening now, just saying, hey, I'm interested in this. And I realize that when I go to events or how people approach it, they do care about Ecosia. They are really informed about our company and what we do and what impact we have, and they have great questions. So knowing that there are a lot of people that have really used the product and care about it at the time they even apply, I do think, yes. So that is much more motivation.
Yeah, no, I also think, definitely think that that's a factor for, the candidate's motivation is definitely higher. I think, I would just put an additional caveat to it. I think you also have to walk the talk. So if you basically, put out a North Star, and I think, Ludmila, you've mentioned this, like you need to publicly kind of, or you can obviously, but I think it's best to kind of publicly declare what's dear to you, what's important to you, what values are important to you. But then you also have to live up to the standard. And if you don't, they could also backfire. So I think that's also something to keep in mind, that if you put out there a certain, kind of certain standard or certain things that you want to take into consideration, and you don't, it can become like a very dangerous tool, so to speak. So you have to be quite careful in how you do this. But I also think, we've had this, maybe it's a very technical example, but we've had this with, we are thinking at the moment about circularity. We have these consumables that we ship to consumers, and we want to ship. We are in the process of coming to the market, right? And we're setting up this circularity program at the moment. And the question is, how far can we go with this circularity at the moment? And that's been heated discussions, and people are really dearly disappointed at times, because it's not all the way it could be, because reality of business also comes into play. And that's something I think that you just have to keep in mind. But I definitely also think that it's a high motivation. Maybe another example of us is we've hired, I have to look at the exact numbers, but I think it's 23 people in the last 3 months, of which, and let's say about, I think it's 80%, but I think it's or at least above 70% are all referrals. So it's all basically driven within the company, and then that could obviously also have different reasons, just work culture. But one of the rewards that you can choose to have is that we would, basically set off CO2 or plant trees in the equivalent of 500 euros if you refer someone. So this is maybe an additional, like a tool. Again, I don't know how much of that is a driver, but this is something that I guess you can do, and we've seen it as a motivation for people.
Yeah, wow, very cool incentive. That's another kind of way for that to encourage people to do referrals. Just quickly following off that, I think, Jenny, you mentioned earlier how Ecosia has grown, and kind of, I think you said 30 to 70 roughly.
Yeah.
Like mm-hmm. Yeah. And how was that for you? Was that kind of the same for Moritz? Did you found motivational candidates through referrals, or did you find that you had like a lot of people applying with high motivation?
Yeah, so we have both. I think, well, we in the end hired, I think what you see, and that's more, I think, a general truth in people culture topics, is that if you have a pre-filter of your own people referring people, that will just be a better channel in terms of conversion of that funnel. I think I am guessing, not being an expert in this, that's generally true, compared to, cold applications. So I think that's a general observation. But what we do see as well is, and we've opened that up as well, we do see a lot of inbound interest. I, again, can't isolate how much of that is related to our mission, or just generally people looking for hardware jobs in Berlin, let's say. Maybe Berlin is a factor as well. I think you've guys maybe seen this as well. Berlin is a big factor for us. We have people now from 26 countries that are all coming. Basically, it's definitely a factor. Is Berlin. So I think that's also something to take into consideration here. And what we've also done, again, hard to isolate the sustainability element of it, but we've opened what we call talent pool, or we call it, I think it's actually on our website, it's called Future Opportunities. So for people to basically be able to leave their CVs and their application for things that will come up. So, and that has been, we've received, it's a big pool of people that we have collected now, that we can kind of tap into once the time is right. But again, hard for us to isolate, or at least for me, to isolate the fact of sustainability in this.
Sure. No, thank you, Moritz. And maybe we can jump to Lubomila. I'm just wary of our time for our panel questions.
So with regards to the candidate motivation, it's really interesting what we observe, because we get around 30 to 40 code applications per week, and all of them incredibly passionately explain why they care about the topic. So it clearly is something that is a driving factor for them, to kind of explain their motivation and try to align their skills to something that maybe is not even explained online, if the position doesn't exist. We also have a talent pool, and this is essentially, we're now a 15-person team, and we are planning on doubling by the end of the year. And this is obviously like a gradual process. As we know, this has to be done in a respectful to also the culture manner. It is incredibly important for us to kind of make sure that we are also respecting the hiring process, I would say, to all these speculative applications, because there's a lot of motivation, I think, especially to sustainability in Berlin today. But if this is the moment to get someone on board just because they're so good in their previous job, it's something to be managed and balanced.
Thing that you touched on of Berlin as maybe an impact for motivational candidates. I think you're probably right there. I think Berlin is sort of in itself quite an vegan and veggie city, as we've discussed. It's quite interesting looking at maybe it's a really high motivational pool here. I have more questions, but I think we'll just jump on to the next one. Just to, like I said, be wary of time. If we could move to the next slide. Great. So obviously all your missions are sustainable missions. So sustainability, adapting, like durability, and sort of maintaining and sort of improving things like in that way with regards to the environment. But sort of looking at culture, how do you create a sustainable company culture? How do you create a company culture that is durable and will last alongside your mission as your company grows? And does this affect your hiring? Do you find that you have as maybe you have more people, there's more of an input into the types of people you hire and then who you select to bring the company forward? Jenny, maybe we could start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are a lot of aspects that we look at. And of course, anyways, with a sustainable company culture, it's one based on our values and how we do things, of course. So we do offer a lot of benefits in these things to support sustainable, how we do processes, how we support people. This is around sustainability. But more than that, I think to have a sustainable company culture and to retain and support your talent, I think it's really important for one to be inclusive and flexible. So for different stages of people's work life, whatever background or age or situation they're in, to kind of find find policies and way to deal with things that includes all of them. So we're very flexible. We have home office days and remote times and just flexibility around how people can create their work lives, so that at any stage of their life, whether they're parenting or whatever they're going through, we can make sure that they can stay with us. And also we have a very international team, so that becomes important, and that makes it inclusive, so that you can keep a workforce in all phases or situations or backgrounds of their life. And with that, I think diversity is also a really, really big topic for us, especially in light of recent events. I think it just shows it so much more. And we're working on diversity. We're working on a strategy, but we're also working with each other to be really good with that. And that is, of course, hiring a big part. And how do you hire diverse, but also how do you create a diverse and inclusive culture then once you have the talent and develop that? And I think that is another big part of it. And then lastly, I think what we try and do is to still give a lot of individual support. So to not grow in this kind of way, okay, now you have rule ABC and this is how it's done. And to kind of have this kind of mass production, but to say, okay, whatever your situation and circumstances are, whatever it is you need. Sure, there are general orientation and guidelines, but we're always open to talk and finding a good solution and just be very human with that. I would say those are some main points for us, for sure.
Yeah, and do you feel like that's carried through from, like we said earlier, from when you were 30 to 70 in the last year? Do you feel that, obviously, although you've grown, do you feel like it, like in some ways, the company culture has changed the same? Has it developed a lot? Have you noticed a real difference?
Yeah, for sure. It needs adjusting. I think and we're working on that, because it's different. How do you have inclusive conversations? It's different when you're 15 people, which for the history of Ecosia, for most of the time, there were 15 and then there were 30 and now there's 70. And also diversity. It's you do at a certain point need a different kind of alignment and a different kind of then structure, even though you don't like structure. So I don't think it has changed, but we need to change in how we're approaching things and changing how we work with it. I think that is one that we're working on, for sure.
Moritz?
Yeah, I guess the key question is, what is sustainability, right? How do you define that? So I guess on the most meta level, I think it's maybe being a bit more long-term oriented in terms of how you treat people like yourself, like people and your market, so to speak, and kind of the resources that you deploy. I think that's maybe the meta level, that what sustainability means, right? Like more long-term thinking of all the factors that you want to keep in mind in the space that you're operating in. So I guess that's the thing. I guess how we define sustainability, and then I think you've said it nicely. I think you have to look into two spaces. You have to look at the values you put out there, the way the things you communicate, and then you have to look at the second thing is the tools or activities you actually basically implement to support these values, to basically live up to the standards that you have set out. And now maybe going back to the values, the way we do it, we have this manifesto kind of published where we say, it's the 4 Ps that are interesting to us. A long-term thinking about our purpose, our products, our people, the planet. So this is the value set that which is all encompassed. I don't want to make it an advertisement session, but all encompassed in what we call in our key phrase, which is better than before. So small steps of improvement. So that's how we that's the values that we have. And then we have certain activities and certain tools that we use, like we have a Green Mitte task force that looks at internal operations of and Ludmila, you know them, how to improve, how to better separate waste, how to avoid certain waste, how to use how to make sure that we for example, travel policy that limits air travel within Germany, for example. OKRs, company goals that are, clearly set out as one of the company goals to basically live up to certain standards. It could be CO2 offsetting. So all of those tools, I think, and activities, and there might be different types of them, also ideally support your values. I think you need both. You need to have a clear direction of where you're going, and then basically activities and tools and things to basically implement towards this vision.
Well, yeah, I definitely think it all kind of goes hand in hand for this durability, which comes back to how you define sustainable. And I think these are all like massively important aspects of it. Great, and Luba Miller, would you like to go next?
What is really important for us is three aspects. One is measure, the other one is impact, and then the last one is diversity, not in a particular order. The measure aspect comes from the fact that we have built a software that measures sustainability. So we essentially follow what we preach, and we kind of have embedded into our way of existing all of these things that we suggest to other companies in order to limit our negative impact on the planet, but also on us understanding on a deeper level, how do we build a company that is not only from the outside, but also from the inside sustainable. The second aspect of our work is impact, and this is our community. This is the external side of things. We have organized only over the last 18 months events for 15,000 people, and this is essentially how do we use this knowledge that we have developed and this capability that we have about sustainability as a tool for others. How do we amplify the knowledge that we have to the outside world? And then the final aspect is diversity. I'm totally on board with what Jenny said. We're 15 people, but we're 13 nationalities, and we have people who literally from all over the world, from different continents, and all from very different backgrounds, quite scientific, but all of them have walked their own way to get to the mission. And I think this adds a lot to also how the world perceives us, because it shows that we understand the importance of differences in ideas and perspectives.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something we're also very lucky to have at Accelerate as well. We're incredibly diverse team, and I think you're right, it brings in lots of ideas and creates this very unique culture, which I think is super important for like this growth of new ideas and like innovation. So yeah, no, I definitely. And yeah, maybe perhaps we can move on to our final discussion point. If we jump to some questions from the audience. We can move this slide over. Yeah, perfect. So this kind of question and discussion point that was really of interest to me when we were coming up with these. So I think, COVID-19 has made the world pause and think about how we treat the planet. And I think this goes from a lot, from small things like making reusable face masks out of old clothes and really thinking about what we really need and consumerism and all this kind of thing. Do you, as a result of what's happened so far this year with the coronavirus, do you foresee that interest in working for sustainable product will increase as a result? Do you think after this that maybe people will have this kind of moment where they're actually more driven into that, because this is something that's definitely been on people's minds as a result of COVID? Maybe Moritz, we could start with you.
Yeah, I think it's a super big question, right? I mean, but I think I have a feeling that Corona or COVID-19 is accelerating some of the dynamics that have been at play for a while now, and basically will make us not act like we're in the 90s still. So I think, and what I mean by that is that I think we have been moving towards a world, especially, and in particular in our countries, so to speak, let's say European continent especially, and I'll touch upon the US in a second. I think we have seen that people are driven towards additional layer of purpose, because one also has to, think that obviously, getting money is also a purpose. It's just maybe there's more to life than that. So I think what we've seen is that there's additional layers of purpose that are being added, or since the, let's say, post-war years, and I think that has been accelerating over the last year. And this COVID-19 crisis, I think, has even more accelerated this process, in my opinion. So I think people will be drawn to more environmentally and socially, impactful teams and ideas. But, and I think that's also something to keep in mind, I think we are living through crazy times in many places on this planet. So I think in the US, I mean, the things that are going on in the US, many people won't be able to afford, wanting to work for a certain thing, because it's survival mode. I think there's many countries where it's like that. I mean, here in Berlin, people stupidly enough celebrate both parties, and but it's kind of, if you look outside, it kind of looks like back to normal, but this is not the case in many places of the world. So I think we will hope, I mean, I'm hoping for the best, but I think I don't know. I don't know if many people will be, or most people will be able to afford these type of questions. It's survival for many, I think.
Yeah, completely. I think you're so right. I think that, yeah, with regards to, we obviously don't know what's going to happen in the situation like it's, you're right, it is like a survival, and money does play into that. But I think you're also maybe right that there will be maybe a spark in interest for it, but like you said, it's whether or not people can manage to get there. Obviously, yeah, like I said, big question, but it's very just interesting to hear all your thoughts on it, as this is your industry and your area of expertise. So maybe Ludmila, you could share some thoughts about where you can maybe see the industry going as a result of Corona.
COVID-19 amplified a lot of issues that society faces, and this is unfortunately not only the climate change crisis, it's also inequality, it's also how unstable our supply chains are, and a lot of other societal issues that I don't need to mention. And it kind of, they cannot be decoupled as issues. The fact that there's some groups of people like us focusing on climate change and wanting to accelerate climate change is a positive side effect, I guess. But there's a lot of negative side effects that are taking the attention of people and are the main topic on their mind. I don't know if anyone followed how many layoffs were occurring in the US. There's a website called layoffs.xyz, and it's just mind-blowing. Can you think of all these people's lives and how they can think about sustainability? They most likely would be thinking of where most effectively they can place themselves so that they can maximize their returns within the shortest amount of time. So I would say it definitely pushes us forward to think about sustainability as us. And there's been a lot of positive initiatives that have started from COVID, including called the hackathons, that incredibly well-connected people from all over the world to build amazing companies that are now getting funding, visibility. But we should not forget about the fact that we live in a complex reality, and it's something that would require a lot of open-mindedness to get to the level where we want it to be, which means that we need to push double hard to get, to a sustainable planet, or sustainable humans on the planet, I would say.
Definitely, I think it's a battle anyway, and I think in light of everything, even more of one. And Jenny, what's your kind of take on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. The question brought up a lot of different points for me. I think, for one, yes, I do think interest is increasing, but I don't think that's only due to COVID-19. I do think with the last years, with the climate movement, all of that, this has already happened, and people are increasingly aware of the issues we're facing, and they're increasingly aware that, we don't have the right solutions, and they can choose also with their voice what they're choosing to a certain extent. And that interest has already started. What I find COVID-19 has particularly done is that we can see in some cases, and not all of them, and in some, how adaptable we are in times of crisis. If we as a society stand behind something and we get together, we can have a really big impact really fast and change things and disrupt them in no time. And this is really an example here how, of course, there are other countries where that is different, but there is a potential there if we as a society get together. And if we were to recognize climate change in that same way, how much could we do? How fast? And I think recognizing that potential is really, really big. Another thing, and that's the same what Ludmila has said, and I really agree with that. Yes, interest, and I think that it's a good word, interest, but not everybody will have the opportunity. This is also economically a really difficult time, and people are afraid of if you look at hierarchy of needs, there are a lot of issues playing into that, and you might have an interest in that, but I think, again, you kind of have to be kind to yourself and see, okay, what is possible where I am in my current circumstances? And I think interest is there, but there's also a reality. And I actually liked what Moritz said. How did you say it? like, so just do better, like better or one step better, or I don't know how you phrased it.
Better than before, yeah.
Better than before. And I think you always have to individually evaluate what is your better than before in where you are at, and not to put yourself down. I think also COVID-19 has brought up a lot of fear in people and all of that. So it's also easy to just, even though you might have the interest, to just kind of shy away and be really overwhelmed. And I think everybody has to really individually find that. But yeah, I do think so. And just one last point that came up for me when I read that, I do think, yes, definitely interest. And I think there are more and more sustainable ideas coming up, and consumer choices are redirecting. And I think this is all a positive development. And I think for me, specifically from an HR perspective, I also think that's an opportunity for social businesses in general to not rest on their mission and say, oh, we're doing this, done. But I think that competition and knowing, because that should be the normal case. I think potentially every business could be run sustainably. And then there's also quality level of how do you take care of your employees, and like you said, how do you make your company culture sustainable? And I do think the more interest is there. I know just very years ago, or typically would say in the charity sector, where you have to work for very little money and put up with a lot of things. That's to name stereotypes there, but it is to some extent true. And I don't think that has to be the case. I think if we look really in the future, it shouldn't be an either or. And I think with that increasing interest, it's also an opportunity to look at that. But this is purely speaking from a company culture perspective.
Nice. Thank you all. I mean, that was, I don't know what I kind of thought would be the answer. It was sort of more of a curiosity for me. So it's so nice to hear all the different ways you will approach the question. I think it's a really interesting thought about how we move forward. Not be possible. So I think now, just looking at the time, just to make sure we get some of the audience questions answered, we'll jump into that. So everyone's been sort of posting a few questions. So I'm just going to go with the most voted answer, which is from Katia. So I'm just going to click here. So I'd love to hear about how you commit to diversity in your hiring in terms of cultural, ethnic background, gender, age, as well as types of professional and academic path. So I think this is probably a nice, like you had mentioned, what's going on in the world right now, and this diversity within companies. So perhaps Liebe Miller, would you like to kick off answering this question?
Sure. So it kind of for us naturally happened to be quite diverse, in the sense that we were never setting out some sort of a quota for amount of women. We actually have more women than men in the team, and also, as I mentioned, with the nationalities, we have 13 over 15 people. I think when we look at candidates, we always look for something new to be brought to the table, and this always comes with a diverse background. It could be cultural, ethnical, gender, age, any kind of experience. And what we do in planning is every single person on the team has to speak to the person that gets to be hired or considered to be hired. And I think by now we've embedded a really deep culture of looking for a kind of exciting new perspective. And this always leads to having someone that is, the last person that we hired was from Southeast Asia. And she is with years of experience in life cycle analysis, and it's something that is totally new to the table for us. And it kind of, I guess, is embedded into the mindset, but we always obviously have like certain checks. For example, at some point we were way too many more women than men, so it kind of we had to like consider how do we make sure that there's a balance between the perspectives. But so far it has been kind of an organic process for us, and I guess this comes with size, which I'm sure the others would be able to share some different perspectives on that.
Nice. Maybe we could hear from you, Moritz.
Yeah, so we also did not at the moment until now, and we as any so kind of set rules or quotes, and I think it's starting to for us to be actually a topic, because we've had the areas we've been hiring in are very male-dominated. So we have electronic engineering, firmware development, chemists. It's quite a male-dominated sector. So what we have set out kind of simple rule is that if there's two, and that never really happens, but if there's two candidates of the same qualification, then we would prefer the female candidate. So that's a very, very simple rule we have. I do think that up to now, though, because for a tech company, we still have or like very traditional tech, not like coding, right? Like actual mechanical engineers, like people working on physics, like in laboratories and building things, very, very male, even more male than the digital engineers. I think we have quite a high quote of or high share of female employees. We have 26 nationalities. We have people from 6 continents. We have people, and I think age is also a big topic. We have now people that are from, I guess, young, I would assume 25 to almost 60, all working together. But I think they're all bound. We come back to the first question by values. So I think they're bound by kind of the same value set. So I don't really have a very good answer we don't have that strong commitment. It'll also be super interesting to hear from the audience or to how you guys would, if you have better ideas of how to increase that, because how to improve this. But I think you should also, and then I'll stop rambling in a second, I think you should also not just optimize for one parameter, which is gender, because if everything else is, really good, I mean, the age bracket works, the professional bracket, and all of that, and it's a very diverse and open-minded person in general as a mindset, then in the end, gender, what does it matter, right? So I think that's also just a final thought before I end.
Thank you, Maurice. Yeah, and I think it's maybe interesting to hear in your role working with the people and the people department. Maybe you can give a little bit of input about how Ecosia is doing that.
Yeah. I do think, much like Ludmila has said, Ecosia was a small company for a very long time, and so a lot of things developed organically simply because they had people who cared about it and who were interested in it. So they did a lot of outreach, especially for female engineers, to host meetups, to do outreach, and also to hire on training schemes. So you would train up female engineers, and there's been a lot happening in the hiring process to make sure that you have checks, that you have more eyes on it, that you reflect yourself, and that you look at an equal distribution within the company. But since I've started and as we've grown, there's really the need now at 70 people to have a bit more reflected and formalized effort and to really look into things. And I've been working with a diversity specialist on that, just to look at what are different things. I'm just going to name a few that we're working on, just because I think it's also interesting to just look at those things. And for one, it's universal design, for example. And I think in a way we've kind of subconsciously been doing that. And universal design is to form your processes and benefits and structures and decision making in a way that it is universal and it includes everyone. So the typical example of that, the easy example, is if you have the boardwalk and you put that down to allow for people with disability, that doesn't put anyone else at a disadvantage. And that also very much works within company and how you set up your work life. Another big thing is training and then helping people understand, because it's a very complex thing, and it's not just about putting out one policy or one to do, but it is really bringing people together. And like Moritz said, diversity is much more than gender or race. Those are very important things, but even within that, there are so many nuances. And it is to reflect on diversity and say, well, do we think a conservative voter can actually be behind a super green mission? Do we potentially have a bias there? How do we evaluate people, and how do we come together and talk about it? And what kind of capacity can we develop there to reflect and have the knowledge and the training and that capacity within us? I think in hiring, self-checks are really, really important. So you always want to build in mechanisms so that you can evaluate yourself. So for example, if you've done one round of hiring, maybe check what was the diversity allocation before that round who has applied, and that even gives you an indication how much outreach you have to do to certain communities. Do certain communities, even though they may speak English, be easier addressed if you were to write it in their language, and can you then access them easier? Or there are certain things to equalize that pool, but even if you have that pool after the first round, have you disproportionately deselected a certain group, and then you can go back and double check yourself. So there are many mechanisms you can build in. And then I think lastly, training is really, really important, and development once you're in the company. Are you getting stuck? I know certain companies where it then seems like, for example, all the women are stuck at the lower level, or certain people of a different diverse background. How do you individually support people to grow in their career path? And I think that's just a few of the examples that we've been working on.
Nice, really nice to hear those. I think also from a recruiter perspective, this is something that we're always, is always at the forefront of our mind as a recruiter, but all we hire for is making sure that we have this open approach to diversity of age, gender, background. It's definitely an incredibly important subject, and I think even more so right now, like we've had a few times. So it's really nice to have the input from you all. Just because I'm very aware of the time, and we just sort of have just under 10 minutes left, we just get one more question in, and this one I think goes back a little bit more to the values and being a sustainable company. So this here. So how do you search for someone that has the right value fit? I'd say not everyone is displaying their values, for example, on LinkedIn. So I think this is a really interesting question. So how do you kind of know the type of talent has what you're looking for, I guess? So yeah, maybe just a couple minutes each, and then we can go from there. So maybe Luba Miller, would you like to start?
Sure. So with regards to values, it's really, I think, a personal process to develop your values and to start putting focus on some of them. What we have learned in the way we approach recruitment is we have the massive privilege of having a lot of inbound. So this kind of develops within you a good understanding of the keywords that are being used by people when they speak about themselves, the motivation that they kind of sometimes even quantify with, like, the commitment of years to a certain topic. Are they just switching? Is this like, did they have this moment of epiphany where they essentially decided to change their lifestyle and become sustainable? Or they saw some massive inequality or injustice and they found climate change to be at the core of that. It really is, I would say, quite of a tailored approach to the candidate. And I think this goes back to the first question that we answered altogether, which was about having respect to the process that people go through when they approach the topic of sustainability. It's not one size fits all. It's a process that we all develop in our choice of becoming, better and more sustainable human beings. I personally take always the time to, spend time on hiring. I think as someone that is at, as a CEO, this is really important topic, because then you define what the culture of the company is. And what I've noticed is that it literally takes me by now probably like a 20-minute, even less conversation to see if this person is doing this because sustainability is something that is a trendy topic, or they really have kind of define something as a value for them. And it's the small things, I've noticed how people always proudly put their reusable bottle on the table as soon as they come to the interview. There's small other things, such as people in their email signature have please don't print this email. This is our way of, my way of helping you also become more sustainable. Today I got an email from a bank that we are working on at the moment, and it was saying, please use Ecosia. This is our preferred, search engine, which I find amazing. People think of adding these little aspects to the way they want to be perceived on the outside. So I would say taking the time to understand who you're talking to and making sure that there's no greenwashing in the statements, because there's plenty of opportunity for that, I would say.
Yeah, thank you so much. Maybe we can just jump to
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Ludmila said. I want to point out one particular thing of the hiring process, which I find really important, and that's the cover letter. As lame as that sounds, but I do think that's your chance to show why you care. And I think a lot of people these days are quickly sending out CVs, and it's not so much, you don't need to show your values on LinkedIn, but that's why you have a cover letter to explain your perspective and your point and why you care as a first step. Because I think in terms how you search, of course, you use certain websites, you use internal contacts, but then you post your job ads on specific channels that might be very like-minded, so either sustainability or tech and these things, of course, but ultimately, and this is actually part of the diversity strategy, is we want to inform candidates better about how we'd like to receive applications and what they should do in it. Because also with that, if you have a very intercultural team, different cultures handle CVs differently, and there are different rules and different expectations. So to make it very clear from our side what we want, I think helps a more diverse group of people handing in an application that is right for us. But in that, I really have to say, what you put in that cover letter, how you describe your motivation and your interest. You don't necessarily have to have worked for 20 years in sustainability to be really deeply passionate by it and be a great fit and be willing to give it your all, but give the recruiter a chance to see that in your application. And I think that is a really important one.
Nice, thank you, Jenny. And Moritz, maybe just the final word from you on the last question.
Yeah, I guess you have to kind of look at it from the entire kind of cycle of putting your declaration out there that you want to hire someone. You would, we put it, it's the first segment that we put in our job descriptions, that we are on a healthy, on a mission to replace plastic, waste, and care about, want to create healthy hydration for everybody. So that's the first part. And I think it's a really good point about the cover letter. Writing a cover letter, definitely worth it, especially one that kind of hits the chords of your values. I think totally makes sense. And then I think it's basically in the talent acquisition process, it's the simple questions of asking, why do you want to leave your current job? And for example, also, why are you applying specifically at Mitte, for example, and how do you care about what we do? I think it's the very simple questions that you need to ask anyways, and then you will see kind of a reflection of the candidate's value set. And then I think we'll take it one step further in the onboarding process as well of hiring, boarding of, that's kind of the first thing that I do with new employees, at least me, is kind of this vision talk of where we go, where are we now, where are we going, kind of to take that. So I think it goes from declaration of wanting to get someone, to find someone that's right, to the whole process of finding that talent acquisition and then onboarding. And throughout that process, I think you have to think of these values. It's not a one check, one gate, oh, now value done, and that's it.
Thank you all so much. I think just in light of timing, I'm sorry we didn't get to reach any more of the questions, but I think what we're going to try and do is actually get some of these questions answered and sent out to people, sort of in a follow-up to this, in a little posting on either the LinkedIn or over email. So please, for all of you who've tuned in and have put questions out that haven't had them asked, we're going to try and get a few more of those answered, just because we didn't get through as many as we thought we would. So I think I wanted to sort of say a big thank you to all our speakers for devoting their time, and it's been a really insightful discussion, and it's been really fascinating to learn sort of about a bit more about what your companies are doing and how you're really approaching talent acquisition and scaling and creating these companies with people who are sort of so passionate about sustainability and about the future of the planet, but also being open-minded to giving new people a chance with their reusable water bottles and kind of looking at it from this aspect as well. That's been really fascinating to learn more from you. And thank you everyone who's tuned in. And we will be posting a follow-up article with a little summary, and also this will be recorded and will be online if you want to watch again, if there's anything you want to go back to. And feel free to reach out to myself, to anyone from Accelerate, and also any of the speakers if you have any follow-up questions after this event. And also keep your eye out for any more Talking Talents coming up. We have a few more coming up in the next few months. Obviously Pride Month is coming up, so there will be one talking about that. So that definitely touches on more on the topic of diversity. So please keep an eye out for that, because I think that's, like we said, something that's on everyone's mind. Can everyone hear me? I feel like I maybe dropped out. Great. Thank you so much for joining, and yeah, we'll hope to see you at the next one.
Thank you.